Aliens quickly regret killing Girl after realizing she was a human. The galaxy was a vast, dangerous place. Among the many races that roamed the stars, the Vorath were feared above all. These aliens, known for their strength and cruelty, had conquered countless planets, enslaving weaker species and extinguishing those who dared to oppose them. They ruled with an iron fist, believing themselves to be the ultimate beings in the universe. One of the many planets the Vorath had claimed was Earth. To them, Earth was nothing special, a small, insignificant world, home to a primitive species of humans who lacked the strength or intelligence to challenge their rule. The Vorath were ruthless in their conquest. They did not even bother to understand the people of Earth. They simply took what they wanted, destroyed what they didn't, and moved on. But on one fateful raid, something unexpected happened. Lena, a young girl from Earth, found herself caught in the Vorath's trap. She had been living a quiet life in a small village when the Vorath came. They took her without hesitation, along with many others, and brought them aboard their massive ship. The Vorath had no interest in her, no plans for her future. She was just another insignificant human to them, nothing more than a tool for their experiments or a pawn in their cruel games. Lena was placed in a cold, metallic chamber, surrounded by the sounds of strange machines and the murmurs of the alien guards. The Vorath had no patience for those they considered weak, and Lena could feel the weight of their indifference. They didn't care that she was scared, that she was alone, or that she had dreams of freedom. All they cared about was that she was a human, and that was enough reason for them to treat her like a piece of trash. The Vorath were ready to execute her. They did not see her as anything more than a temporary nuisance, someone whose life had no value. They had seen humans before, weak, fragile, and easily broken. She was no different. As the guards stood by, their cold, calculating eyes focused on her, Lena could feel her heartbeat in her throat. She tried to remain calm, but the fear was overwhelming. She had no weapons, no allies, and no way to escape. But what the Vorath did not know was that humans had something they could never understand, an inner strength that was beyond measure. Lena had been raised with love and hope, with a belief that even in the darkest of times there was a way out. She had no idea what she would do, but she knew one thing: she was not going to give up, not without a fight. As the Vorath prepared their execution device, a high-tech machine designed to vaporize her in an instant, Lena took a deep breath. She closed her eyes, not in surrender, but in focus. She didn't know what was happening inside her, but she could feel something stirring deep within. It was as if the fear had transformed into energy, a raw, untapped power. The Vorath thought it would be a simple affair. They had executed hundreds of prisoners like Lena before, and it always ended the same way. One push of a button, and the prisoner would vanish in a cloud of smoke, their life extinguished in a second. But when the machine activated, something strange happened. Instead of Lena vanishing, a shockwave of energy erupted from her body. The Vorath had never seen anything like it. Their sophisticated technology malfunctioned, and the guards were thrown backward, crashing into the walls with a force that left them stunned and disoriented. For a moment, everything was chaos. Lena's body glowed with a faint yet powerful light, and the Vorath stood in stunned silence, unsure of what to do. Their advanced sensors failed to detect anything unusual. All they knew was that the human girl they had been prepared to execute was somehow not only alive but stronger than anything they could comprehend. Lena's eyes flickered open. She could feel the energy surging through her, unlike anything she had ever known. Her body was alive with power, and her mind was clear. The Vorath's technology had tried to take her life, but it had only awakened something inside her, something that had been dormant for as long as humans had existed. The Vorath leader, a tall and imposing alien with jagged features, stepped forward, his cold eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "What is this?" he demanded. His voice echoed through the chamber, but there was a tremor in it now, one that betrayed his fear. Lena stood up, her legs shaking but steady. She didn't know how she had done it, but she knew one thing: she was no longer the helpless human they thought they could crush. The power inside her had been awakened, and she could feel it growing stronger with each passing moment. The Vorath leader took a step back, his eyes flicking to his subordinates. They had seen many species bend to their will, many worlds fall to their might, but never before had they encountered anything like this. Lena was different. She was something they couldn't control. She was human, and that made her a force to be reckoned with. What are you?" the leader asked, his voice shaky. Lena looked at him, her eyes unwavering. I'm human, she said, her voice calm but filled with an undeniable strength. And you'll regret underestimating me. Lena stood in the midst of the chaos, her heart racing, yet somehow calm at the same time. The Vorath soldiers were scattered around her, struggling to regain their footing after the shockwave that had erupted from her. Her eyes burned with the strange energy flowing through her, but she wasn't afraid. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she had control over her fate. The Vorath leader, the one who had been ready to execute her just moments ago, slowly raised his hand to his helmet. His fingers trembled as he signaled to the others to step back. He was the most powerful of his race, the one who had led countless conquests, the one who had destroyed entire civilizations. But in the presence of this human girl, he was now unsure of his own strength. Lena's gaze locked with his, and for a brief moment she saw something in his eyes. Fear. It wasn't something the Vorath showed often. In fact, it was rare for them to even understand the concept. They were conquerors, and they believed that no other race could ever stand in their way. Yet here was a human girl, glowing with strange power, making them doubt everything they knew about the universe. Get back, the leader hissed to his soldiers, his voice harsh. His command was more out of instinct than rational thought. The Vorath soldiers obeyed, stepping backward, their weapons still aimed at Lena, though they seemed uncertain of how to approach her now. Lena took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She could feel the energy inside her, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. She didn't fully understand it, but she knew it was the key to her survival, and it was something the Vorath hadn't anticipated. They had underestimated her, assumed she was just another helpless human, another victim to their power. But she was more than that. The Vorath had made a grave mistake. They had thought they could control every species in the galaxy. They believed the universe bent to their will, that nothing could challenge their might. But they had never encountered humanity. They had never faced the untapped potential of the human spirit. Lena clenched her fists, feeling the power within her intensify. She could feel the energy crackling in the air around her, and the realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't just a random surge. This was something more, something human. You think you can kill me? She said, her voice steady, each word full of confidence. You think you can just wipe me out like you've done to countless others? You don't even know what you're dealing with. The Vorath leader sneered, his sharp teeth visible through his helmet. You're just a human, weak, pathetic. You have no idea what you're facing. Lena's smile was small but fierce. You're the one who has no idea, you never understood us, but now you will. Without warning, she lifted her hand. A pulse of energy shot out from her fingertips, striking the ground in front of the Vorath leader. The blast was enough to send a shockwave through the air, shaking the walls of the ship. The Vorath soldiers scrambled, unable to comprehend what had just happened. They had never seen anything like this. They had never witnessed a human display such power. Lena didn't wait for them to recover. She moved quickly, her body moving with a fluid grace as she dodged the incoming blasts from the Vorath's weapons. Each time one of their shots came close, she deflected it with ease, her energy forming a protective shield around her. It was as if the very air bent to her will, the power of her human spirit fueling her every movement. The Vorath leader watched, his expression shifting from arrogance to disbelief. He had thought he could crush her in an instant, like he had done to so many others. But now he realized that this human girl was unlike any other. She wasn't just a prisoner. She wasn't just a victim. She was a force of nature. Stop her, he barked, his voice full of panic. His soldiers, now fully aware of the danger Lena posed, fired their weapons in unison. But their shots were ineffective, bouncing off the invisible shield surrounding her. Lena continued to move, her power growing stronger with every second. She had never felt anything like this before. It was as if the universe itself was reacting to her, responding to the human will that had been awakened inside her. She could feel her body becoming one with the energy around her, as if she were a part of the very stars themselves. With a sudden burst of strength, Lena thrust her hand forward, and the ground beneath the Vorath soldiers cracked open. A wave of energy surged through the ship, sending them flying backward. They crashed into the walls with a deafening sound, their bodies limp as they slumped to the floor. The Vorath leader stumbled back, his eyes wide with fear. His soldiers were incapacitated, and he was now facing Lena alone. For the first time, he was afraid. He had underestimated her, thinking she was just another weak human, but he was wrong. Lena was no ordinary human. She was a force that he could never control. "You're not just a human," he whispered, his voice trembling. "What are you?" Lena took a step forward, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm the future of humanity," she said, "and you're about to find out just how powerful we can be." The Vorath leader raised his weapon, but Lena was faster. She extended her hand, and with a single motion, she sent a blast of energy toward him. The Vorath leader was thrown across the room, crashing into the far wall with a sickening thud. Lena stood there, her chest rising and falling with each breath. The Vorath had been the most feared race in the galaxy, and yet they had fallen to a single human. She had proven that no one, no matter how powerful, could stand against the human spirit. As the Vorath leader lay motionless on the ground, Lena turned toward the ship's control panel. She didn't know how to fly the ship, but she didn't need to. The ship had been a symbol of their oppression, a tool of their cruelty. Now it would be the vessel of their defeat. Lena slammed her hand onto the control panel, and the ship trembled as it began to power down. The Vorath had lost, and she had won. The Vorath leader groaned as he slowly rose to his feet. The power he had once commanded, the overwhelming force of his entire race, now seemed insignificant in the face of the human girl standing before him. He had been a conqueror, a ruthless being who had destroyed entire worlds, and now he was on his knees, a defeated leader, trembling before someone he had once considered weak and powerless. Lena stood tall, her breathing calm but her heart racing with adrenaline. She had done it. She had taken down the Vorath leader and his soldiers with nothing more than her own strength. But even as the energy inside her surged, she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The Vorath leader was no longer standing with the confidence he had once had. He stared at Lena, his expression now one of fear and disbelief. He had thought that humans were weak, insignificant, and that their entire species could be wiped out in the blink of an eye. But here she was, a human, stronger than anything he had ever encountered. He had made a grave mistake. You're not like the others," he said, his voice shaky, struggling to find the right words. "What kind of power do you possess?" Lena's gaze was steady. "The kind of power that you never bothered to understand," she said. "You thought you could conquer us. You thought we were just another species to wipe out, but you were wrong. Humans are more than what you see on the surface. You didn't know what you were dealing with." The Vorath leader's eyes widened. He had known that the humans were resilient, but this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Lena's power, her strength, it wasn't something that could be measured by their technology or their cruel methods of conquest. It was something deeper, something that no amount of power could suppress. "You've made a mistake," Lena continued, her voice steady and strong. "You underestimated us, thinking we were just easy targets. You thought we would bend to your will. But now you see we're not like anything you've faced before. We don't give up, we don't break." The Vorath leader tried to gather himself, but he knew in his heart that the battle was already over. "You will never win. The Vorath are too strong. We control everything. Your victory here is nothing more than a small delay." Lena shook her head. "You don't get it, do you? It's not about power or control. It's about survival. It's about fighting for what's ours, and we will fight. We will fight until the very end." The Vorath leader looked at the destruction around him, the soldiers lying unconscious, the once mighty ship now quiet and powerless. He had never imagined that a single human could do this. He had never imagined that their strength was something more than what he had assumed. He had never understood that humanity, in its simplest form, was the force that would bring him and his entire race to their knees. For the first time, he realized that the Vorath had never truly conquered anything. They had only suppressed what they couldn't understand. And now they had awakened a power they were not prepared for. Lena took a step forward, her presence now more commanding than ever. "You don't belong here anymore," she said, "and neither does your race." With a flick of her wrist, she sent another wave of energy through the ship, disabling more of the Vorath technology. The lights flickered and the control panels sparked, as if responding to her will. The Vorath leader's eyes widened as he realized just how much power Lena had now. It wasn't just her physical strength. It was her mind, her determination, her refusal to be broken. "You'll regret this," he growled, though the words felt weak, as if they didn't carry the weight they once did. He had lost. And in that loss, he realized something even more terrifying. The Vorath had underestimated humanity for far too long. It wasn't just Lena who had power. Every human, every single person on Earth had the potential to rise and fight back. They had the ability to change the course of their fate, to defy those who sought to control them. Lena looked down at him, her expression one of quiet strength. "You won't get the chance to make me regret anything," she said simply. She turned her back on the Vorath leader, knowing that the next steps were just as important as the one she had already taken. She needed to send a message, not just to him, but to every single Vorath in the galaxy. She needed them to understand that humans weren't just a race to be dominated. They were a force to be reckoned with. Lena walked through the corridors of the Vorath ship, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The walls were lined with advanced technology, but none of it seemed to matter now. The ship, once a symbol of their power, now felt hollow. It was just a machine like any other, incapable of stopping her. She moved to the central control room where the heart of the ship lay. The ship's core was a massive, glowing sphere, pulsating with energy. It was the source of all the Vorath's power. She could feel the energy radiating from it, and for a moment she wondered if she could destroy it. But no, that wouldn't be enough. Destroying their power wasn't enough. She needed them to understand that they couldn't just destroy humanity without consequence. Lena placed her hands on the control panel, focusing all her energy on it. She closed her eyes, feeling the power inside her surge once again. The core began to flicker, its energy destabilizing under her touch. She could hear the Vorath scrambling behind her, trying to stop her, but it was too late. The ship was already beginning to shut down, its systems failing one by one. The Vorath leader had been wrong. Lena wasn't just a human. She was the beginning of something much larger, something that would change the course of the galaxy. And now, the Vorath would learn the hard way. As the lights in the ship dimmed, Lena turned back to the Vorath leader, who was now barely conscious on the floor. She gave him one final look. "This is the beginning of the end for you," she said, her voice calm and steady, "and the beginning of a new future for us." With that, Lena walked away, leaving the Vorath behind in the wreckage of their own hubris. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her world, and nothing would stop her now. Lena stood still, her mind racing as she surveyed the damage. The Vorath ship, once a symbol of their incredible power, was now a quiet, broken thing. The energy from the core had subsided, the once blinding light dimming to a faint glow. The ship, which had been designed to crush entire civilizations, now felt lifeless, a hollow shell of its former self. But as she stood there, Lena knew that this was only a small victory. The Vorath were not easily defeated. They had conquered countless worlds, and Earth was just one more on their list. She had won this battle, but there were more battles to come. She could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about humanity. It was about fighting for a future that had been stolen from them. The silence around her was deafening. The sounds of the Vorath scrambling to regain control of the ship were distant now. She could hear their muffled voices in the corridors, but they no longer seemed to carry the same authority they once had. They were afraid. They had underestimated her, and now they were paying the price. Lena knew that they weren't the only ones who had underestimated humanity. Her people back on Earth had been told that they were nothing special, that they were weak, that they had no place in the greater scheme of the universe. She had heard it all her life. And yet here she was, standing in the heart of a Vorath ship, taking it down piece by piece, and she knew that she wasn't alone. There were billions of humans out there, just like her, waiting for the right moment to fight back. The Vorath leader had been right about one thing: they had no idea what they were dealing with. Lena wasn't just any human. She wasn't the weak, defenseless creature they thought they could crush. She had the strength of her ancestors running through her veins, the will to survive that had kept humanity going for millennia. And now, that strength was becoming something more. It was becoming a force that couldn't be stopped. She turned toward the ship's control panel, where the systems were still glitching. The Vorath's advanced technology had been damaged beyond repair, but Lena knew that the ship was still functioning on some level. It was important. She needed to make sure that it couldn't be used again. She needed to make sure the Vorath couldn't use it to hurt anyone else. She walked over to the panel and placed her hand on it, her fingers barely grazing the surface. The ship responded, its lights flickering and then stabilizing. The energy from the core still hummed in the background, but it was weaker now. Lena could feel the ship's heartbeat slowing, like it was no longer alive. She closed her eyes and focused. The energy she had tapped into before was still with her, like a constant presence just beneath the surface of her skin. It was powerful, raw, and ready to be shaped. She could feel it pulse in time with her breath, and as she focused, she could feel the ship respond to her. She wasn't just controlling it, she was merging with it, becoming a part of it. For a moment, she felt connected to everything. The ship, the Vorath, the universe itself. She understood now that humanity's true strength didn't lie in physical power or advanced technology. It lay in their adaptability, their creativity, their ability to rise from the ashes and find a way to survive. The Vorath thought they had all the answers, but they didn't understand the resilience of humanity. They didn't understand that humans could endure, could grow, could evolve in ways that no alien race had ever seen. Lena opened her eyes and stepped back from the control panel. The ship was now under her control. The Vorath had nothing left. Their weapons, their technology, their strength, all of it had been reduced to nothing by the power of one human. But as she stood there, Lena knew this was only the beginning. The Vorath were a dangerous force, and this victory wasn't enough. She had to send a message, not just to them, but to everyone in the galaxy. She had to show them that humanity was not to be underestimated. They would no longer be pushed around. They would no longer be seen as weak. Lena's thoughts turned to Earth. The planet she had left behind, the home she had fought for. There were millions of people out there, just like her, who didn't know what was happening in space, who had no idea that their world was at risk. They were living their lives, going through their days, unaware of the threat that lurked just beyond the stars. She couldn't let the Vorath come back. She couldn't let them have another chance to destroy humanity. Lena turned toward the control panel once more, her hand hovering above it. She had an idea, a plan. If she could disable the Vorath ship completely, there would be no chance for them to come back. There would be no way for them to regroup and try again. But as she began to execute her plan, a voice interrupted her. "You think you've won?" The Vorath leader's voice was faint, but it carried through the ship's intercom system, echoing in the empty corridors. "You think you can defeat us that easily? You are nothing. We are eternal. You will never be able to stop us." Lena's face hardened. She had known he wouldn't give up easily, but his words didn't have the same weight anymore. They didn't have the same power. He was weak, and he knew it. "You're wrong," she said, her voice calm but filled with certainty. "You're not eternal. You're just another empire waiting to fall, and we're the ones who are going to bring you down." She pressed a series of buttons on the control panel, and the ship responded with a loud, rumbling noise. The Vorath leader's voice cut out, replaced by the sound of the ship's engines powering down. The lights dimmed further, and the core's energy began to dissipate. The Vorath ship, once a symbol of dominance and control, was now nothing more than a broken, defeated vessel. Lena took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly from the strain, but she didn't feel fear. She felt triumph. She had done it. She had taken down the Vorath and their ship. She had shown them that humanity was not to be underestimated. But her work wasn't over, not by a long shot. Lena turned away from the control panel and made her way toward the exit. She had to get back to Earth. She had to warn them. The Vorath weren't the only threat in the galaxy. There would be more. But now humanity knew what it was capable of. Now they had a chance to fight back. As Lena walked through the darkened corridors, the sound of the Vorath leader's voice still echoed in her mind. "You will never be able to stop us." But Lena knew the truth. The Vorath were just the beginning. And she was just getting started. Lena's footsteps echoed in the darkened corridors of the Vorath ship, each step resonating with a sense of finality. The ship, once brimming with the power of an empire, now felt hollow, as if it were a tomb to a civilization that had fallen. She had done what she set out to do. She had taken control, wiped out their strength, and shown them just how far humanity could go when pushed to the edge. But as she walked through the quiet ship, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was still ahead. The Vorath leader had been defeated, but his words still echoed in her mind. "We are eternal. You will never be able to stop us." The Vorath had been dangerous, but they were not the only threat lurking in the galaxy. There were more empires, more powerful races, and more challenges yet to come. Lena had won this battle, but her war, was far from over. She exited the ship's command center, her mind racing with plans for the next step. The ship was slowly shutting down, its systems failing one by one. It wouldn't be long before the Vorath ship was nothing more than a lifeless shell. But Lena couldn't just leave it behind. She needed to make sure it couldn't be used again. She needed to make sure the Vorath couldn't regroup. She reached the main docking bay, where the rest of the Vorath ships were parked. There were dozens of them, massive warships that had been used to crush civilizations and enslave entire planets. But now Lena knew these ships were no longer a threat. She would make sure of it. Lena reached into her belt and pulled out a small device, a tool she had found among the wreckage of the ship's control systems. It was a simple thing, but it had the power to disable the Vorath ships for good. She attached it to the central console and activated it, watching as the lights on the ships flickered and dimmed. The energy from the Vorath ships began to drain away, their systems shutting down one by one. But even as she did this, Lena couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. The Vorath were only one part of the galaxy's problems. She had seen their cruelty, their arrogance, and their belief that no one could challenge them. But now she knew better. Humans had the power to fight back. They had the power to survive. And she wasn't the only one. As Lena worked, she thought of Earth. Of the people she had left behind. The Vorath had tried to take their home, but they hadn't counted on the strength of a single human girl. But Earth was just one planet in a galaxy full of dangers. Lena had learned that the hard way. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's place in it was uncertain. But now she knew they could make their own destiny. They weren't helpless anymore. She completed the shutdown sequence for the Vorath ships, and the docking bay fell silent. The ships were nothing more than empty husks, their power drained. It was a small victory, but it was one that would send a message to anyone who thought humanity was weak. They were wrong. Humanity could rise. Humanity could fight. Lena stepped away from the control panel, feeling the weight of what she had just done. She had taken down the Vorath. She had disabled their ships. But she knew this wasn't enough. She couldn't just leave the Vorath's power in the hands of others. She needed to get back to Earth. She needed to warn her people. They couldn't afford to wait. The galaxy was full of threats, and they needed to be ready. But even as she turned to leave the docking bay, Lena couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. She had done something no one had ever thought possible. She had shown the Vorath that humanity was not weak, not helpless. She had taken down one of the galaxy's most powerful empires with nothing but her own strength. But the Vorath weren't the only ones who would come after Earth. The universe was full of creatures, races, and empires that would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. And humanity was still young, still vulnerable. She didn't have the answers, but she knew that she couldn't stop. Not now, not when humanity's future was at stake. Lena made her way back to the ship's command center, the one that had once been filled with the Vorath's leaders and warriors. It was empty now, its lights flickering and its systems slowly going offline. She didn't have time to rest. She needed to find a way back to Earth. She needed to make sure that the Vorath couldn't regroup. She needed to make sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. She reached the ship's control panel and activated the emergency distress beacon. It would send a signal to Earth, warning them of the Vorath's defeat and telling them that the fight was far from over. It was a message of hope, but also of warning. Earth was still vulnerable. They needed to be prepared for whatever came next. Lena sat back in the command chair, feeling the weight of the situation settle over her. She had won this battle, but the war was just beginning, and she wasn't alone. Humanity wasn't alone. The message would reach Earth soon. But she needed to do more. She needed to rally the people of Earth, to bring them together in a way that had never been done before. She needed to make sure that humanity wasn't just a bystander in the galaxy, that they were a force to be reckoned with. Lena stood up from the chair, looking out at the stars through the viewport. The galaxy was vast and unknown. But for the first time in a long time, Lena felt like she had a place in it. Humanity had a place in it, and they would make sure the universe knew who they were. She turned back to the control panel and began to chart a course for Earth. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready. She had already faced the impossible and come out victorious. Now she would face whatever came next, knowing that she wasn't alone and that humanity would always find a way to fight back. As the ship powered up, Lena's thoughts turned to Earth, to the people who had no idea what was happening in space, to the future she was fighting for. The Vorath might have been defeated, but the galaxy was still full of challenges, still full of dangers. But Lena had learned one thing: the power of humanity was unstoppable. No one could take that from them. The ship's engines roared to life, and Lena set her course toward Earth, ready for the next chapter in humanity's fight for survival.